I was checking out this debate between perspective philosophy and Matt Dillahunty, and as it tends to be the case with perspective philosophy, who, in my opinion, doesn't do the best job of explaining concepts, what he means, what he thinks. I just think he's a poor teacher, right? And Matt is famous for misdirecting, dodging, distracting, interrupting. I guess people would say he's a good debater technically because, well, he's an excellent sophist, right? He's able to, because he's whatever means, methods he uses to convince people, deceive them, and I'm talking about the ape theists, they're more than willing to be deceived, right? They want that. However, he's able to convince the people that already agree with him, by the way, right? He basically just says what a lot of people want to hear, and they think he's a good debater. And in another way, I guess he is a good debater because he's able to convince people by trickery, right? Some people. So it's twofold, I would say. And he is an intelligent man, right? I'm giving him credit while at the same time saying that he must necessarily be dishonest, right? Because how can you be intelligent and not get this basic shit, right? Maybe he's just lost, right? Maybe he just has a high verbal IQ, but in reality isn't really able to put two and two together all that good. Well, I don't know. That doesn't matter. But be that as it may, atheists such as Matt, Sam Harris, Hitchens, you know the deal. Those guys were very instrumental in convincing me to believe that God exists, because anytime I'd listen to them debating, right, as an agnostic myself, truly interested in the truth, they've always, every single debate that I've seen, right, there were some instances where maybe there'd be a stalemate, they'd be able to use trickery to stall, or their opponent wasn't savvy enough to be able to hold their feet to the fire and then press them on certain points, right? Maybe he was a little beta, right? Or too in awe, if you will, of their stature, or grateful of, these ape theists with huge followings giving him a chance and the exposure where he didn't want to anger them, maybe. And Matt just acts like a little girl. He cries too much, right, in these debates. He snaps. He can't control his emotions very well in some instances. If there have been a few stalemates maybe here and there, that the atheist was able to use enough trickery and stalling and misdirection, distraction, ridicule to be able to throw the theist off, right? That did happen, but most of the debates where I would watch these guys, they would absolutely get destroyed in these debates. They would lose badly, right? They would be completely incoherent, illogical, full of shit, dishonest in my opinion, which convinced me that, well, since the other side is right, well, I mean, right? Let's follow what's true, right? I hope that makes sense. So, in this debate, even though it was difficult to follow many instances, I think this was. I'm not sure perspective philosophy necessarily won the debate, because maybe he didn't press Matt enough on certain points, and he really wasn't arguing for the premise of the debate, which is a whole nother topic in and of itself, right? So I'm not sure. The debate kind of felt like a stalemate, but there was this one point where he absolutely stumped Matt, and Matt used a version of his famous dodge, I guess you would say, misdirection, just asserting things without evidence, basically saying, grant me all of my premises so that I could win, right? Or just assuming that perspective philosophy would grant him a premise. So the sticking point here was that while perspective philosophy claims that God, or the mind of God, is perfect, it's okay for God to doubt himself, right? And Matt's contention is, well, how can a perfect mind doubt itself? That doubting yourself is imperfect. Now, okay, what's the evidence for that, right? He's just asserting it. Where's the evidence that that doubting, a mind doubting itself is imperfect, right?
Imperfect. He is perfect, even in his humanity. It would be more typically Protestant to say that actually the humanity and the divinity within Christ was only made possible, even though it's a contradiction, was only made possible through the power of God.
So he was perfect when he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Absolutely, because that shows the
perfect weakness, perfect confusion.
No, it shows his humanity. There's nothing wrong with having weakness.
His perfect, flawed humanity.
His humanity is...
There's nothing imperfect about having weakness. If he's God, then how can he think that God betrayed him?
He is God, because how could... Have you ever thought you've betrayed yourself? Have you ever doubted yourself? Do you think God could be...
Am I perfect?
True to himself without the...
Why do we grant you that doubting oneself is imperfect? Why? What's the argument for that, right? Just because I say so, right? Now, it may seem obvious to people, right, that doubting oneself, you may feel like that makes sense. Okay, yeah, but what convinced you? What's the argument that convinced you that doubting is imperfect? Provide an argument, right?
Capacity to doubt himself.
Am I perfect?
No, but do you think that he could...
If I were perfect, I would not doubt myself, because I'm perfect.
How could...
If I were perfect, I would not doubt myself, because I'm perfect. So he just assumes, right, that doubting oneself is imperfection. Okay. But justify it. Can you what's the justification for that, right? Now, perspective philosophy will give you a justification. I think he could have done a better job, and he did that later on, I think, in this conversation, which we won't get to. But if he could make an argument that doubting yourself is a condition necessary for perfection, right? And you don't have any arguments, you're just saying doubting is imperfection in the face of the fact that he just argued that it's a condition necessary for perfection, then you lose. What's the argument?
Would you know you were perfect unless you did doubt yourself?
How did you know you were perfect unless you did doubt yourself, right? So Matt is a believer, I guess not in this debate conveniently, but in general, he's always been a believer that a claim has to be falsifiable to have any chance of being true, right? If it can't be falsified, then you can't prove it true, right? So you have to doubt all claims in order to prove them true, to be able to prove that they are true, right? I mean, how do you know what's true, right? Well, you use reason and logic, right? You question the premise, you doubt the premise in order to prove that it's true, right? Like just basic shit, right? Is Matt really intelligent, or is he dishonest? How does he not get this, right? He himself states that claims, propositions have to be falsifiable, right? In order to have any chance of being true. You have to doubt them. You have to show that there's a way to prove that they are wrong, right? Which is a form of doubting, in order to prove them true, right? So what does he say? How would you know you're perfect if you didn't doubt? Is that what perspective philosophy says? Let's listen to it again.
To doubt himself.
Am I perfect?
No, but do you think that he could...
If I were perfect, I would not doubt myself, because I'm perfect.
How could you know you were perfect unless you did doubt yourself?
Well, I'm resisting.
Stumped. Absolutely stumped, right? He's resisting what?
The phrase is just say, how ridiculous.
Oh, well, you didn't resist very long, did you, Matt?
But you just said, how could you know you're perfect?
How ridiculous. Not an argument, Matt. Do you have an argument?
Unless you did something imperfect.
Okay. How would you know you're perfect unless you did something imperfect? So Matt just assumes his premise without giving any justification for it, right? Doubt equals imperfection. What dictionary are you getting the definition of doubt from, Matt? And if you believe that doubting oneself is imperfect, in the light of, in fact of, in light of all the evidence that perspective philosophy provided here, and he will expound on that later, right, and talk about the need to be able to falsify premises in order to be able to prove that they're also true. You need to doubt things to be able to prove them true, right? In light of the evidence to the contrary, Matt, why, to the contrary of your assumption, premise, right? Why do you just assume your premise is true when you were just given evidence that it isn't, and you don't have any evidence that your premise is true? What are you doing, right?
No, I'm saying, how would you know you are perfect unless you engaged in the capacity? And there's nothing imperfect.
Because a perfect circle doesn't exist, but if we assume that a perfect circle does exist, could God create a perfect circle?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Sure. So,
I mean, the concept of the circle
if the circle is truly perfect, is there any possibility that it is imperfect?
Can something be true and false at the same time, right? Really? Really, Matt? Really? So this reminds me of, is it a paradox? Whatever it's called, I don't know. But this idea, this question, right? Can the omnipotent God create a rock so heavy that he can't lift, right? If he can't create a rock that he can't lift, then he's not, did I say impotent? All powerful. Then he is impotent, right? If a God can create a rock big enough that he can't lift, then he's not all powerful. But if he can't create a rock that he can't lift, then he's not all powerful either, right? So basically what these people are saying is, can God engage in a contradiction? If not, if God can't contradict himself, then how can he be perfect, right? These motherfuckers are absolutely incoherent, right? God is logic. God is reason. God is the guarantor, the creator of logic. He is logic, right? God acts in accordance with logic because God is logical, right? That's the perfection. That's some of it, right? That's the perfection of God. He's perfectly logical. So what these guys are saying is like, well, if God can contradict himself, then he's not all power. He's not perfect. If God can contradict himself, then he's not perfect, right? But then if God is able to contradict himself, what are they going to say? See, told you God's not perfect, right? Are these guys retarded? Are they just dishonest? Or do they just love the smell of their own farts so much that they just keep inhaling them? You know what I mean? The perfection of God is the fact that he's logical, right? He follows the laws of logic. He is the laws of logic, right? He's logical. So in order to be able to know anything, right, we have to doubt if it's true. That's a necessary condition. That's part of logic, right? How do you know anything, right? How do you know anything? How do you know if anything's true? Well, you have to use logic to get there. But Matt is saying, well, if God is perfect, then why does he need to use logic when God's perfection entails logic? Dummy. But then you read the comments in the comment section, and all the atheists are like, Matt crushed them. Wow, what a beautiful mind. Amazing. Peace out.